Welcome back to War Thunder. Welcome to the tank review on the M60A1, the last American medium tank at rank 5 with a battle rating of 8.0. I will give you a full rundown about the statistics, a major comparison to its major opponents on the battlefield. I will also give you tips and tricks how to make this tank work, how to play it, and how to also take it out effectively on the battlefield when this is your opponent. Now, the M60 is overall a really decent tank. It has no major drawbacks, but there is one drawback that really interferes heavily with the gameplay in War Thunder, especially after having played the T10M. This tank just doesn't feel right in comparison. And remember, the T10M is actually a heavy tank. Now, I think that overall the M60 has its place, and if Gaijin would come around and buff this one specific drawback, I think this tank could be really, really great. It features a very commonly known gun for medium tanks at rank 5, namely the M68 cannon, which is, to all intents and purposes, the very same as you see on the Centurion Mark 10 and the Leopard and the predecessor, the M60. And I think if you know what to do with the Leopard or the Centurion Mark 10, then you will not be surprised. Although there is one little surprise, and that is the penetration value of the stock shell. But this comes all later on. Now I think it's time for the armor. And the armor comes as a massive surprise, as for example the lower plate is not that weak. 117mm slope backwards at 54 degrees at the very bottom part of the lower plate results in an effective thickness of 230mm respectively. Depending on the angle, it goes even up to 250. That's the lower part. The upper part is even stronger in its thickness of 137, and with the same angle you have even thicker thickness. Yeah, and it goes, depending on the angle, even up to 300mm. Then we also have this middle bar here, that's nearly 400mm. And then the upper hull is weaker than the lower hull, which is, the very same matter for the predecessor, the M60. And 108mm at 66 degrees, so it has better slope, results in roughly around about an effective thickness of 230 to 220, depending on the exact angle that you look at. Then we have also this driver's hatch. Now this is not a really big prominent weak spot, but it is prominent, especially when HE splashes down from the turret front. It can penetrate here, but this is like with all tanks. 36mm top armor is not that bad. Now then we have the turret ring with 114mm, and that is the weak spot from the front. But don't get fooled, because behind that is another 25mm, but just partially. So you can be safe from the ZSU-57 at medium to long range, but short range it might get through here in the on the turret ring. Now before we come to the turret, let's talk about the side armor. And the side armor is relatively complex, but overall really thin. The thickest part is this middle bar here, right where there is the major gap in between the tracks. It is 70mm. That is not too bad for the side armor for a medium tank overall, but it's nowhere near in comparison to, for example, the Russian medium tanks that have overall 80mm. But still, it's not bad. Below that, 36, at the front, 43. Even this nearly belly armor is 36mm as well. Behind the tracks on top, 36. Even at the slope, you don't exceed 50mm. And there we also have 45. So overall, there is AAA penetrating area. Also, this front plate here behind the front drive wheel is 50mm. Same at the rear with 36. Now the rear is also relatively weak, 28, 40, 25, and the top is just 20mm. This is very thin, and there is nothing below. So aircraft will shoot your engine there, and you know, high explosive shells, rockets, everything. Same goes for the top of the turret, although it's slightly thicker with 25 millimeters. Speaking about the turret, it's not that bad. It is a rework of the M60 turret, so it looks kind of similar. And the turret front here is 215 millimeters thick. That is not bad, especially the cheeks, both symmetrical, angled. They are really strong. Now, then we have also the gun mantle, and it's just 127 millimeters thick, and there is nothing behind. And we also have two holes for this view holes and the gun, so to speak. We also have a gun mantle frame with 50 millimeters, and we have a partial overlay with the turret front, so to speak. But nothing really saves you, and this is kind of bad that you just have to shoot right next to the gun and you have an easy time penetrating this tank. Furthermore, the rooftop is visible from the front, and although it has partially an overlay with this gun mantle frame, it's just under 50 millimeters of thickness, and even though it's highly angled, you know, high explosive shells, really big ones, you know, KV-2 for example, they can penetrate there, and especially HESH when aimed at this part here, at this machine gun port, which is a massive drawback on the tank. It just detonates there and splashes down. And yeah, this machine gun port is really big. It looks like a tumor. Thickness is, you know, it changes a lot, but most enemies will penetrate here. Especially this part here is where, for example, a lot of AAAs shoot and kill your commander, which is a shame because the commander also commands this 50 caliber machine gun, which is the best secondary weapon you have, aside from this coaxial 7.62 millimeter machine gun. The side of the turret, from the front to the rear, it becomes weaker and weaker. 230 millimeters, that's really good. 215, 228, and there, yeah. So the back of the turret is the weak spot, or the back section of the side armor of the turret. The rear armor is also just 57 millimeters thick. So the armor from the front is very good, but the major tip is don't angle it, and you know, try to rock forwards and backwards to deny your enemy a clear shot at your weak spots. Now, you have 10 degrees of gun depression, so keep this in mind when you're working ridge lines, that that this weak spot here, the turret ring, becomes thinner. So overall, the armor is surprisingly effective, especially at distance, where, you know, the weak spots, so to speak, vanish a little bit, and it's more difficult to aim for the enemy. Overall, I have to say that also the side of the turret, when you do it right, you can try to let ATGMs hit there and not there. And at the right angle, you know, low penetrating ATGMs might just not go through. But I think that's enough of the armor. Let's talk about the X-ray. And we can see that we have 4 crew members, the driver in the middle, and typically American, the gunner and the commander on the left hand side when you look at the tank, and the loader on the right hand side. Also, this gun with the gun breech, by the way, this gun breech gets damaged very often, together with this massive engine and the transmission being mounted in the rear together with the fuel tanks. And by the way, they just love to blow up. And furthermore, we can see that those 63 shells of ammunition for this 105mm gun is distributed literally everywhere in the tank. 2 ammo racks beside the driver. We also have 2 ammo racks in the turret, and also 2 ammo racks below the gun. Now the major tip is take all the ammunition but 36 shells, and that gives you practically enough ammunition. Let me do the math. It's 27 shells, something like this. But first of all, the high rate of fire and the lack of one hit to one-shot capability really hinders the tank. On the other hand, you know, at least those ammo racks in the turret should be removed. Those are debatable. I take them out as well because I found out that I simply don't live enough to really go run through my entire ammunition supply. So that is the interior, and that is also the armor. Let's talk about the mobility. And on paper, the mobility certainly doesn't look too bad. We have 750 horsepower engine, but we are on the heavier side of the medium tank line, so to speak. Just the Chieftain is marginally heavier, and we have 52.2 tons. That gives a specific horsepower to ton ratio of 14.4, and that is actually on the lower side. This is, to be honest, the slowest horsepower to ton ratio for any medium tank, except the Chieftain, but the Chieftain is a different story in my opinion. And that means that you always have problems climbing a hill in comparison to other medium tanks. And the top speed also is rather on the lower side. And while it is a little bit better than the M48, and to be honest, a little significantly better than the Chieftain, with its 41 kilometers an hour top speed, you're always a little bit slower than the Soviets and also both Leopards. But one good thing is that it has neutral steer alongside with all other medium tanks except for the Soviet ones. So, but let's put it into the bigger perspective. Let's compare it to some heavy tanks as well, shall we? And now we actually can see where the problem lies. The horsepower to ton ratio is more like of a heavy tank, just significantly better than the Conqueror's horsepower to ton ratio. It has practically the same as the M103 and even a little bit less than the T10M. But the T10M again is more like a medium heavy tank, so to speak, but with significantly better armor. And, you know, then we also have, again, just the advantage of the top speed. But again, theoretically, the T10M has better top speed. Just the reverse gear is better than all the heavy tanks, with the exception of the Conqueror, where it has the same. So, roundabout, the M60 again is somewhere between a medium and a heavy tank. And especially when being stock, the M60A1 together with the M60 is so painfully sluggish. Now, there is one more thing about the mobility, and that is the suspension. And the suspension is really terrible. Together with the bad gun elevation and depression speed, we actually come to the major problem of this tank. But I think it's at this point that we actually talk about the firepower. Before we actually come to the ammunition selection, I want to give you a comparison to all the other medium tanks. The M60A1 features with the M60 the 105 M60A1 cannon. It features 63 rounds overall as ammunition capacity, which is the highest. The reload is a respectable 8.3, but that is just faster than the T54 and the T62. Also, the turret rotation speed is average. Over 20 degrees is always good, and 21 degrees is just being passed by the Leopards and the M60, its predecessor actually. And the gun depression is actually overall the best. -10 of gun depression and 20 degrees of gun elevation. So those stats are not bad, especially when we compare it to the heavy tanks. And here we can actually see that this tank indeed, gun-wise, is a medium tank. The M60A1 has very respectable stats, which shouldn't come as a surprise, and it is for all intents and purposes the same gun featured on the Leopard 1, A1A1 and Centurion Mark 10, which is not mentioned here. And it is much better in its gun handling stats than all the mentioned heavy tanks here. Again, not mentioning the mouse. And you can see that, you know, stat-wise, on paper, this tank has no real drawback. Good turret rotation speed, good gun depression, good shell capacity. And what about the ammunition? Well, and there it becomes a little bit interesting. Let's begin with the stock shell. And the stock shell is practically the shell that sets it apart from the Leopard's stock shell and also the Centurion Mark 10's stock shell. This is the M7A1 APDS shell, and it features 321 millimeters of penetration, which is round about 20 millimeters more than the M39A2 on the M60, or which with the same name, the M13 on the Leopards. It is also better than the T62's stock APDFS shell. The 3BM4 features 295 millimeters of penetration, and the 3BM3 features 350 millimeters of penetration. So it's around about in between the stock and the upgraded armor-piercing shell of the T62, and for a medium tank, that is a really good stock shell. Now, I think the stock shell just really doesn't cut it. It has a high muzzle velocity, leading is relatively easy, it's for free, silver line wise, and it's a bit more reliable in its overall handling, in my opinion, than the stock shell on the Centurion Mark 10 or the M60, the predecessor, or also the Leopard's, the DM13 APDS shell. So it feels a bit better, and you should always take a few shells with you to fire through bushes, trees, obstacles, even house walls you can fire through with APDS. You have to try it out how it works for you. The next shell is the HESH shell. The M393 HESH shell has 145 millimeters of penetration against all angles at any distance, and performs here very similar or exactly the same as on the M60, where it is the same shell, and also the DM502 on the Leopards. But 145 millimeters is enough to go through the front plate of a, for example, IS-4, but it's not good enough to go the front plate of a King Tiger. That 150 millimeters of HESH penetration is just featured on the Centurion Mark 10, which is surprising as it is practically the same gun, but it features 5 millimeters more of penetration. The HESH shell seems to be more optimized, and also 150 millimeters of penetration you will find on both 120 millimeter guns of the British heavy tank, the Conqueror, and also the end medium tank of the British, the Chieftain. They feature 150 millimeters of penetration, which makes that HESH shell a bit more reliable against the overall opponents that you face. And overall, HESH, in my opinion, is still unreliable. It has a relatively slow muzzle velocity of just 730 meters per second, so that is roughly half of what you have with the APDS shell. So aiming especially against long-range targets is difficult, and it works very badly when you hit the tracks, or when you hit spaced armor or some additional armor like the front tracks on the IS-3 and so on. So there it doesn't work. Also, you have to research it, unlike on the Centurion Mark 10 and the Chieftain and the Conqueror, for example. So yeah, it might be very good for people that really train with this shell, but in my opinion, it is not reliable enough. The M456 heat shell, on the other hand, features very good penetration values against 400 millimeters at any distance, as it is a heat FS shell. It features a relatively high muzzle velocity of 1173 meters per second, and in this respect it performs exactly like the DM12 heat FS shell on both Leopards. However, it is not as strong as the 3BK4 heat FS shell on the T62 with its 440 millimeters of penetration. However, this heat shell seems to perform rather well, and it is the backbone of the destroying power of the M60. If you don't have unlocked this shell, you really struggle. Again, it is a tier 4 upgrade, so you will get it very late. It's a long, painful way there, especially as you need so many other upgrades with the M60. I will come to this in a moment. And yeah, without the heat shell, you are a bit teethless, in my opinion. On the other hand, heat also features drawbacks, such as that you can't fire through obstacles, the fuse gets set off by fences, bushes, trees, everything. So if you don't have a clear line of fire, you have problems, in my opinion. And those are annoying drawbacks. And depending on the and here we come to actually the amount of switching that you need to do with the ammunition. Like with the M60 and the Leopards, and to a certain degree the Centurion Mark 10, you need to know when to load which kind of ammunition in hindsight. And that means the pure fact that you can switch the ammunition once the shell is loaded really bites this tank in the butt, in my opinion. Now overall, you can always just load the Heat FS, but it is a rather expensive shell, and at the end of the battle you will be left with no credits, or will even make a minus if you have a lot of missed shots. Again, I said that you should take out 36 shells out of the ammunition rack, so the turret ammunition rack and also the middle ammunition rack is emptied, but that leaves just a limited amount of options for your ammunition layout. Overall, I would like to have just 2 ammunition types, of which one is my primary ammunition type. But with the M60, depending if you're in a city fight or if you fight in hilly terrain with a lot of bushes and trees, you really need to know what you're actually firing. And again, it's such a long and painful upgrade way, and I hated it on the Leopard, I hated it on the M60, and I also hated it on the M60A1, although I have to say that a few Golden Eagles exchanged the owner here, so I hope you don't blame me for that. But it is really annoying that you have to stick with the stock APDS shell. Although it's a good shell, again, in comparison to the other stock shells, it certainly has a very good performance, and it seems to be a bit more reliable in its overall handling. I still can't get into grips with it. I tried numerous battles with pure APDS. I didn't make any kills, and you suffered heavily at the hands of the Russians, because first of all, they could one-shot you, especially from the side, with their stock shells. Very reliable, as your crew compartment is very tight, so to speak. And you know, one shot in the turret is all that you need, because there are 3 crew members. So, how to make this tank work? Where are the tactics? Now, again, I have to say, many of those tactics are spoiled by the machine gun turret, especially in realistic battles. Try to be with some other tanks so that you have support. It's really necessary. Try to have the jump on the enemy. Don't try to rely on your armor. It might help very often and might save you surprisingly often, but you should not rely on it. You are not a mouse, or you're still a medium tank for all intents and purposes. And especially players at this battle rating are relatively experienced. Now, please don't do side scraping. The side armor is more than just unreliable. The frontal armor is, yeah, this is more like main battle tank armor, to be exact. A lot of the enemies that will really fire at you are the annoying ones. Leopards that bought their way through to the heat shell, and then your armor is not worth that much. ATGMs, like especially the IT-1, the Russian one. Oh boy, did I suffer at the hand of the IT-1. So try to flank, try to not be the one that rushes straight into the enemy. Try to pick one-on-ones, and if you know that you're facing multiple enemies, just get out of there. Just reverse into cover, wait for the storm to be over until you have an advantage position again. Repositioning again is difficult because the tank overall is sluggish, especially when stock, so a lot of the modules you really need. Again, like with the Leopard, you need way too many modules to make the tank work, unlike, for example, the Russian tanks, which perform so much better even stock. And what should you research first? Well, it's kind of a no-brainer for any tank. You need the repair kit, you need the fire prevention system, you need all the gun upgrades, especially to make the gun work at longer distances, and then you need to research the ammunition. But then you also must not neglect the mobility upgrades. And the first upgrade you should get is the engine, as it delivers as much horsepower as both the transmission and the filters combined. In my opinion, rangefinder, artillery support, and also the tracks are not that important, so you can leave those upgrades to the very end. But again, this is kind of personal preference. But now, here we are on Stalingrad, and that ATGM, you can see the bad gun handling here at work again. Like, the lifting speed is just too slow. Many tanks with bigger guns have a much better gun handling. Now, I thought that the M60A1 would improve the gun handling compared to the M60, like the Leopard A1 does it with the Leopard, but it's not really the case. It's just a bit of remodeling of the armor, and also the stock shell got slightly better. By, I don't know what it actually is, 8%, something like this. Yeah, and you can clearly see that the M60 overall is not a bad tank, but other tanks just leave it in the dust, and it's snapshots like you just saw here that really makes it so annoying. Like, it can do everything, but nothing spectacularly good. Let's compare it. In my opinion, when you compare it overall to other medium tanks, it's kind of not right there where it should be. The Leopard, fully upgraded, is more mobile, and it also isn't as sluggish. And it also can retreat better and is a lower profile tank. The Chieftain, on the other hand, has the best APDS shell in the game, and you get it from the beginning with 400mm of penetration, massive damaging effect, and a higher rate of fire on a bigger gun. Just think about this. Also, you get a better performing HESH shell that makes literally the difference between being able to kill a King Tiger from the front with HESH and not. Yes, you can aim for the lower plate, but then there is the transmission that will absorb all the shrapnels. And I just have, like, I don't know, 40 seconds repair time for a machine gun? 30 seconds? That's insane. But if I don't repair it right now and I get damaged again, I have to repair that as well. So I have to repair it now. This is kind of what really lets War Thunder realistic tank gameplay suffer so much, in my opinion, as somebody that comes from arcade. Now, if you play nothing but realistic, you might think, it's not that bad, but for me it's really very annoying, and it just sucks out the fun so much. The game could be so much more fluent without all those stunning and repair mechanics, but that's just a personal opinion. On the other hand, the M60 gets damaged so often, and it can soak up damage as well, thanks to the armor. And there is a little bit better survivability. The ammo racks are not that well known in comparison to the T-54s or the T-62s or the Leopard or the Centurion Mark 10 therefore. And yeah, back to the comparison. The Chieftain can also go hull down, and then it is a really ugly beast. And it just can't weather the storm once it is in the right position. The M60 has overall a better hull than a turret. You know, that is surprising. and you know, you can still get penetrated from AAA by the front. Not as drastic like, for example, a Leopard or the Patton series, but still it's highly annoying. And let's just see what the shells can do against a mouse. Yep, that heat shell just disappeared on the strong point. I actually did not want to shoot there. I anticipated that this guy has no ammunition in the turret, but as we will see with the third shot, he actually has. If he had not ammunition in the turret, I could have pumped, I don't know, multiple shells again into his tank. And this is why I actually took the stunning shot for the engine to set them on fire. And there we can see, not one-shotting a Kugelblitz again. And here the APDS probably wouldn't have done any damage. And we can see he killed my commander. And I had to reload for the third shell to kill him. And again, my gun breech got slightly damaged, despite this being HVAP, which does not shrapnel that hard. But again, it's not enough to repair it. But yeah, overall, this tank is just not there. It's always in a not advantageous position. Watch this shot. Yep, a heat shell just got deflected from the upper top of the Leopard and actually bounced on the turret lower side, or the turret belly, so to speak, not setting off the fuse. So I'm not sure if this is working as intended. And then I bounce off the track with the heat shell. This is what I mean. This happens to me so often. Now you can argue, well, you didn't aim properly, unlike with this shell. But you know, it's the same with the APDS. And this APDS actually performs better than the APDS on the Leopard. So with this in mind, you hopefully can understand my frustration with these guns that have on paper such good stats. I switched to hash because I want to be smart, fire it into the side of a Kugelblitz, not killing him even after the second shell, and I get hammered from the side by AAA again. I'm burning, crew got knocked out, gun is damaged, engine is broken, gets set on fire again, now my gunner is dead, and yeah, that's it. That's it with the M60. I'm done. I'm dead. I can't do anything against this guy. And then actually the second one, the first one opens fire again, but it's the one on the side that actually kills me. So that was my tank ace. And at this point I did not really bother going in. I tried it with the M60, the M103, and got spawn camped again. So that's actually the gameplay for today. Now overall I think that the M60 is a tank with a lot of average stats, and none of the good stats he can really exploit, at least when I play it. There are people out there that swear their life on how awesome this tank is. I can understand that there is certain potential, but to make it work in realistic battle is very hard for me. And also in arcade there are drawbacks, like that you have to upgrade until you have the heat shell to make those snapshots, and you have to pump in multiple shells into the opponent to reliably take him down, unless you have a good shot at the ammunition rack or kill the last crew member. This tank really suffers heavily from being average. It has nothing exactly very special for it. Now I'm sure that if I would spend like 100 more battles with it, I would be much better in it if I have more patience with it, but I'm always more result orientated, and I think this is a big curse for this tank, I guess. It is relatively good in defensive situations where you don't have to advance, and I think the biggest drawback is the vertical gun orientation speed. It really just kills this tank for me. But this is it for today. I hope you enjoyed the tank review. I hope I could help you out with tips and tricks and to give you an understanding how this tank works, at least for me. Let me know in the comment section if you have additional tips and tricks. Overall, I hope you liked the video. If so, please give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more. And we will see each other on the battlefields of War Thunder.